The campfire crackled softly as Jack Miller sat alone in the Rocky Mountains, watching the stars twinkle in the clear night sky. His trained eyes scanned the tree line, a habit he had kept from his military days. 10 years of working as a survival expert had only made his instincts sharper. Something felt different tonight, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. The first sign of trouble came when the crickets stopped chirping. Then the wind died completely, leaving an unnatural silence in its wake. Jack reached for his hunting knife, his muscles tensing as years of training kicked in. That's when he saw it, a soft blue light cutting through the darkness above the treetops. At first, he thought it might be a helicopter, but helicopters didn't move like that. The light danced through the sky like a leaf in the wind, stopping and starting in ways that defied physics. Jack quickly doused his fire and moved toward the tree line, but he wasn't quick enough. The blue light expanded, forming a perfect circle in the sky. Jack's body suddenly felt lighter, as if gravity itself had lost its grip on him. His feet left the ground, and panic set in. The kind of panic he hadn't felt since his first firefight in the military. He tried to grab a tree branch, but his fingers slipped right through it, as if the wood had turned to smoke. The world around him blurred, and then everything went black. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a room that looked like it was made of crystal. The walls pulsed with a soft inner light that changed colors slowly, from blue to purple to green. Jack lay on what seemed to be an examination table, but it felt like it was made of warm glass. Tall figures moved around him, their bodies long and thin, with skin that looked like polished marble. They wore no clothes, but their bodies seemed to shimmer with patterns that shifted like oil on water. Jack tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. He could only watch as the creatures studied him, their large almond-shaped eyes reflecting the changing lights of the room. They spoke to each other in sounds that reminded Jack of wind chimes and running water. One of them held up a device that looked like a transparent tablet, showing holographic images that Jack recognized as human anatomy. With growing horror, he realized they were discussing him like scientists discussing a lab specimen. The tallest of the creatures stepped forward, placing a cold hand on Jack's forehead. In his mind, words formed, not as sounds but as clear thoughts. You have been chosen for the greatest honor. Your sacrifice will bring prosperity to countless worlds. Jack wanted to argue, to fight back, but his body remained frozen. More words filled his mind. For 10,000 years, the Crystal Empire has maintained balance through the ritual of ascension. One being from each discovered world offered to the gods of the ancient death world. Through their sacrifice, we achieve technological enlightenment. The creature showed Jack images of other humans, men and women who had been taken before him. He saw their faces, filled with the same fear he felt now. None of them had ever returned. The images shifted to show a dark world where strange lights danced in an alien sky and massive shapes moved in the shadows. The gods must be appeased, the thought words continued. Your species has shown remarkable potential. Your sacrifice will bring great advancement to your world, though they will never know of your gift. Jack's military training screamed at him to resist, to fight back, but the creature's technology held him completely paralyzed. He could only watch as they prepared him, attaching small devices to his body and injecting him with something that made his skin tingle. They dressed him in a suit that seemed to be made of living metal, fitting itself perfectly to his body. A mask was placed over his face, connecting to the suit's systems. Jack realized it was some kind of survival gear. They weren't just going to kill him quickly. Whatever fate awaited him on their death world, they meant for him to face it fully aware. As they moved him to another room with a large circular platform, Jack made a silent promise to himself. He wouldn't die easily. Whatever these creatures expected of their sacrifice, he would show them that humans weren't simply cattle to be slaughtered for their gods. If he was going down, he would go down fighting. The crystal beings began a haunting melody, their voices rising and falling in perfect harmony. The platform under Jack began to glow, and the last thing he saw before the light consumed him was the satisfied look in their large alien eyes. They had no idea that they hadn't just chosen another helpless sacrifice. They had selected a survivor, a fighter, and the one human who might just turn their ritual into their worst nightmare. The light faded, and Jack fell to his knees on alien soil. His stomach turned from the transport, but the suit he wore kept him from throwing up inside his mask. The air around him glowed with a dull purple light, making it hard to tell if it was day or night. He looked up at a sky that had no sun, only swirling clouds that pulsed with strange colors and occasional flashes of lightning. The ground beneath his feet felt wrong. It wasn't quite soil and wasn't quite rock. It had a slight give to it, like walking on old rubber. All around him, plants that looked like a cross between mushrooms and trees gave off their own light, creating a forest of blues and greens that stretched as far as he could see. A display inside his mask showed readings he didn't understand, but a few were clear enough. The air was toxic, filled with gases that would kill him in seconds if his suit failed. The temperature was just above freezing, and the gravity was surprisingly similar to Earth's. At least he could move normally here. Jack checked the gear they had left him with. The suit seemed to be his only real equipment, though he discovered it had some basic features: a short-range scanner, temperature control, and what looked like a simple map display. The map was blank except for a small circle showing his immediate surroundings. He would have to explore to fill in more. Something caught his attention, a sound that seemed to echo from everywhere at once. It was like distant thunder, but it didn't fade. Instead, it grew stronger, becoming a deep rumble that he could feel in his bones. The glowing plants around him dimmed their lights, as if hiding. Jack's military instincts kicked in. He quickly moved to the nearest large tree mushroom, pressing his back against its trunk. The surface was smooth and cold, but it gave him some cover. He needed to find better shelter, and fast. In the distance, something massive moved through the forest. The ground shook with each step, and Jack could see the tops of the tree mushrooms swaying. Whatever it was, it had to be bigger than any animal he'd ever seen on Earth. He waited until the footsteps moved away before leaving his hiding spot. The suit's scanner showed some kind of depression in the ground about half a mile away. It might be a cave or at least some kind of shelter. He moved carefully, staying close to the larger plants and avoiding open spaces. The journey was slow. Twice more he had to hide as different creatures passed nearby. One looked like a floating jellyfish that gave off sparks of electricity. Another was some kind of pack animal that moved on 6 legs, each one ending in what looked like hands instead of paws. They hadn't noticed him, but he knew his luck wouldn't last forever. As he got closer to the depression his scanner had found, Jack started to notice things that didn't seem natural. The ground was too flat in some places, and some of the rocks were arranged in patterns that couldn't be random. Someone, or something, had built structures here once. The cave turned out to be an entrance to some kind of ruin. The opening was clearly carved, though ages of this world's weather had worn away any details that might have decorated it. Jack's scanner showed the air inside was just as toxic as outside, but at least it would provide some shelter. Inside, he found more evidence of civilization. The walls were lined with strange symbols that gave off a faint glow, and the floor was made of some kind of metal that hadn't rusted despite what must have been thousands of years. This wasn't just a cave. It was something left behind by whatever species had once lived here. Jack wasn't the first sacrifice to find this place. He found evidence of others who had sheltered here, scratch marks on walls, remains of makeshift tools, and in one corner, what looked like a pile of alien bones. None of them had survived long enough to find a way home. A new sound made Jack freeze. This wasn't the distant thunder of giant creatures or the strange calls of alien wildlife. It was closer, echoing from deeper inside the ruins. A sound like metal scraping on metal, followed by what could only be described as breathing. Heavy, rhythmic breathing that spoke of something very large and very alive. Jack checked his suit's oxygen levels. He had maybe 3 days of air left. After that, he would suffocate in this toxic atmosphere. 3 days to figure out how to survive, how to escape, or how to make peace with joining those bones in the corner. As the breathing sounds grew closer, Jack realized he might not even have that long. Jack pressed himself against the ruin's wall as the breathing grew louder. His heart pounded so hard he worried whatever was coming might hear it. The scraping sound of claws on metal echoed through the corridor. And then he saw it. The creature was huge, easily the size of a horse, but built more like a wolf. Its body was covered in overlapping plates that looked like armor, and a row of spikes ran down its spine. 6 eyes, each one glowing with a soft blue light, were arranged around its head like a crown. But what caught Jack's attention most was the fresh wound in its side, still seeping something that looked like silver blood. The beast limped into the chamber, clearly injured from a recent fight. It hadn't noticed Jack yet, too focused on finding a safe place to rest. Jack's survival training told him to stay still, to let it pass, but something else made him look closer. The creature's movements were careful, planned. This wasn't just an animal acting on instinct. Without warning, the beast's head snapped toward him. All 6 eyes locked onto his position, and a low growl filled the chamber. Jack had a split second to make a decision that would either kill him or, well, probably still kill him, but maybe in a slightly different way. He slowly raised his hands, palms out, and stepped away from the wall. The beast's growl deepened, but it didn't attack. Instead, it shifted its position, keeping its injured side away from him. Jack recognized the behavior. It was defensive, not aggressive. It was scared. "Easy there, big guy," Jack said, knowing the creature couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone would help. "That looks like a nasty wound you've got." He kept his movements slow and deliberate as he reached for a small medical kit built into his suit. The Crystal Empire had probably included it to prolong their sacrifice's suffering, but now it might save his life. The beast watched every move, its growl becoming more of a warning rumble. Jack opened the kit, pulling out what looked like a healing gel. He put a small amount on his gloved hand, then held it out where the creature could see and smell it. "This might help," he said softly, "but you're going to have to trust me a little." For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the beast took a step forward. Its 6 eyes studied Jack's face through his mask, then looked at the gel on his hand. With surprising gentleness, it moved closer, allowing Jack to see the wound properly. The injury was deep, probably from a fight with an even bigger predator. Jack carefully applied the gel, ready to jump back if the beast reacted badly. Instead, it stood perfectly still, watching him work. The gel seemed to have an immediate effect. The silver blood flow slowed, and the beast's tense muscles began to relax. "There you go," Jack said, stepping back to give it space. "That should help." The beast made a sound Jack had never heard before, something between a purr and a hum. It shook itself, testing the injured side, then did something completely unexpected. It sat down, still watching Jack, but its posture had changed. The aggression was gone, replaced by what looked like curiosity. Jack sat down too, keeping some distance between them. His scanner showed the beast's body temperature was incredibly high, and its armor plates were actually giving off small amounts of electricity. This wasn't just some alien animal. It was a perfectly evolved survivor of this death world. "I guess we both needed a friend today," Jack said. The beast tilted its head at his voice, then made that strange purring sound again. "I'm going to call you Shadow," he added. "Seems fitting, given how well you blend into this place." Shadow, as if understanding it had been named, stood up and moved closer to Jack. It lay down next to him, its massive body providing warmth in the cold ruins. The gesture was clear. It had accepted him as an ally. Jack found himself smiling for the first time since his abduction. The Crystal Empire had meant to sacrifice him to their gods, but instead they might have given him exactly what he needed to survive: a partner who knew this world and its dangers. As Shadow's breathing settled into a peaceful rhythm, Jack began to think that maybe, just maybe, he had a chance after all. Jack woke to find Shadow nudging him with its massive head. The beast had recovered well overnight, its wound already healing thanks to the gel, and what seemed to be an incredibly fast natural healing ability. But something was wrong. Shadow's ears were perked up, all 6 eyes focused on a deeper tunnel they hadn't explored yet. The ruins had kept them safe through what passed for night on this world, but Jack's suit showed he had already used up a day's worth of air. He needed to find answers, and soon. Shadow seemed to understand his urgency, taking the lead down the dark corridor. The deeper they went, the more the ruins changed. The walls became smoother, and the glowing symbols grew more frequent. Jack noticed that Shadow's armor plates gave off a faint glow when they passed certain symbols, almost like they were responding to each other. This was no coincidence. They entered a vast chamber that took Jack's breath away. The ceiling rose so high it disappeared into darkness, and the walls were covered in massive screens, though most were dark and broken. In the center of the room stood what could only be described as a control station, a half-circle of panels and strange devices, all covered in dust. Shadow moved with purpose now, as if it knew this place. The beast approached one of the panels and pressed its head against it. Suddenly, the panel lit up, responding to something in Shadow's biology. Jack watched in amazement as holographic images filled the air around them. The images told a story. This world, the Maw, as the Crystal Empire called it, wasn't a natural death world at all. It was engineered, created by an ancient race as a testing ground. The toxic atmosphere, the strange creatures, even Shadow's species, all were part of an experiment. More images showed Shadow's kind being created. They weren't just animals, they were engineered guardians, designed to protect something important. Their armor plates, their ability to interface with the ruins' technology, their intelligence, it was all purposeful. A noise from behind made them both turn. Another survivor stood in the doorway, a creature that looked like a cross between a bird and a lizard. It wore a suit similar to Jack's but made for its alien form. The creature made a series of clicking sounds, then raised its hands in what was clearly meant to be a peaceful gesture. Shadow didn't growl, which Jack took as a good sign. The alien survivor approached slowly, then used a device on its suit to project simple images. It wanted to communicate. Through basic pictures, Jack learned there were others, a small group of survivors from different species who had found ways to stay alive in the ruins. The alien led them to a hidden chamber where 5 other survivors huddled. Each was from a different world, sacrificed by the Crystal Empire at different times. They had survived by scavenging technology from the ruins and helping each other, but none had found a way to escape. One of the survivors, a being that seemed to be made of crystal itself, showed Jack why. The Crystal Empire's ships only came at specific times, following ancient patterns they believed were divine signs. The survivors had seen the ships, but had no way to reach them through the toxic atmosphere and deadly creatures that roamed the surface. But things were different now. Shadow wasn't just Jack's companion. It was a key to understanding this place. Through more projected images, Jack learned that Shadow's species was meant to activate something in these ruins, something the ancient builders had left behind. The crystal being led them to a sealed door covered in symbols that matched the patterns on Shadow's armor. For years, the survivors had tried to open it, believing it held important secrets. Shadow approached the door, its plates glowing brightly now. The symbols responded, but the door remained sealed. Jack studied the patterns carefully. They weren't just decorative, they were a puzzle. And the Crystal Empire, for all their worship of this place, had never understood what their gods had actually built here. But Jack was starting to see it. The door needed 2 things to open: a guardian's touch and human problem-solving. As he looked at his new allies, Shadow, the survivors, this ancient technology, Jack felt hope growing stronger. The Crystal Empire thought they were sacrificing victims to gods. Instead, they might have just brought together exactly the right combination to unlock this world's greatest secrets. Jack's fingers traced the patterns on the sealed door while Shadow watched intently. 2 days of air left in his suit, and every breath counted now. The crystal being, who Jack had started calling Prism, projected images showing that the door had been sealed for countless sacrificial cycles. The symbols were arranged in a spiral pattern, each one connecting to the next like a circuit. Shadow's armor plates glowed brighter when it touched certain symbols, but not others. Jack noticed something interesting. The symbols that didn't glow matched the patterns he'd seen on the Crystal Empire's ships. "It's not just a door," Jack said aloud, earning curious looks from the other survivors. "It's a test." He pointed to the patterns, using gestures to explain his theory to the others. The ancient builders hadn't just created guardians like Shadow. They had created this entire world as a proving ground. The bird-lizard survivor, who moved with surprising grace despite its bulky survival suit, brought out a collection of small devices they'd salvaged from the ruins. Most were broken, but a few still held power. Jack recognized some of the symbols on them from his military days. They were navigation tools. Working together, they began to piece it together. Shadow's species wasn't just meant to guard this place. They were meant to guide worthy species to whatever lay behind that door. The Crystal Empire had it all wrong. Their sacrifices weren't meant to die. They were meant to solve this puzzle. Shadow seemed to understand what they were trying to do. It moved from symbol to symbol, its plates glowing in different patterns. Jack started mapping these patterns, while Prism used its crystalline body to refract the light in ways that revealed hidden marks in the symbols. The next discovery came when one of the other survivors, a being that looked like living smoke in its transparent suit, showed them something crucial. It could slip through small gaps in the ruins' walls, and it had found ancient machinery still humming with power. The ruins weren't dead. They were in standby, waiting for the right combination of guardian and solver. Jack's military training kicked in. He started organizing their resources, using gestures and simple drawings to communicate his plan. They needed 3 things: to open the door, to understand what was behind it, and to use it before the Crystal Empire's next sacrifice arrived. Prism's knowledge of crystal technology helped them understand the Empire's patterns. The next sacrifice would arrive in 3 days, cutting it very close with Jack's remaining air supply. But there was hope. The smoke being had found something else. A chamber full of survival suits, made by the ancient builders, in perfect condition. The group worked in shifts. While some rested, others helped Jack test different symbol combinations. Shadow never left his side, its presence seeming to boost the power of any systems they activated. The beast's intelligence showed more and more. It could remember complex patterns and even suggest corrections when Jack made mistakes. Through trial and error, they discovered that each survivor's species had a role to play. The bird lizard's sharp eyes could spot hidden symbols. The smoke being could access tight spaces. Prism could manipulate light to reveal secrets. Even the quietest survivor, a small creature that seemed to be made of living metal, proved valuable. Its body could conduct energy between different parts of the ruins. But time was running out. Jack's suit warned him that he had less than 2 days of air left. The symbols were starting to make sense, forming what looked like a key sequence, but they still couldn't get the door to fully activate. Something was missing. That's when Shadow did something unexpected. It pressed its head against Jack's suit, and suddenly the display inside his mask changed. New information scrolled across his vision. The beast was sharing data, somehow connecting with his suit's systems. In that stream of information, Jack saw what they needed. The door wasn't meant to be opened with just patterns. It needed a sacrifice of a different kind: energy. The survivors gathered around as Jack explained his revelation through gestures and drawings. Shadow's species could generate enormous amounts of energy through their armor plates. The ancient builders had created them that way on purpose. Combined with the unique abilities of each survivor's species, they might have enough power to activate whatever lay behind that door. As they prepared for their attempt, Jack looked at his unlikely team. They were no longer just survivors. They were about to become something the Crystal Empire never expected. Revolutionaries. The moment of truth arrived sooner than they had planned. Jack's suit blared a warning. 12 hours of air left, and the Crystal Empire's ships were appearing in the toxic sky above. They had to act now. Shadow stood before the sealed door, its armor plates glowing brighter than ever before. The other survivors took their positions around the chamber, each one connected to salvage technology from the ruins. Prism's crystalline body sparkled as it channeled energy from one of the ancient power sources. The smoke being had slipped into the wall systems, ready to redirect power. The bird lizard survivor perched near the ceiling, its suit modified to broadcast energy signals. Jack placed his hand on Shadow's side, feeling the energy humming through the beast's armor. The living metal survivor had helped them create a connection between Jack's suit and Shadow's natural energy output. They weren't just trying to open a door anymore. They were attempting to wake up an entire ancient facility. The first attempt shook the entire chamber. Shadow's energy pulsed through the circuits hidden in the walls, making ancient systems flicker to life. But it wasn't enough. The door remained sealed, though some of the symbols had started to rotate and shift. Above them, they could hear the Crystal Empire's ships landing. The next sacrifice was about to begin, and with it, their chance to escape. Jack's suit warned him again. The air was running dangerously low. They had one more chance to get this right. Now, Jack shouted, though he knew the others couldn't understand his words. But they understood his gesture. All at once, they activated their salvage devices. Shadow's body tensed, and energy exploded from its armor plates. The metal survivor began to glow red-hot as it conducted the massive power surge. The smoke being became a living conductor, carrying energy through the walls. The chamber filled with blinding light as Prism refracted and amplified the energy through its body. The bird lizard's modified suit sent out pulses that matched the frequency of the door's symbols. And Jack, his suit now linked to Shadow's power output, felt electricity course through his body. The door didn't just open, it shattered. Behind it, they found exactly what they needed: a hangar filled with ships. Not the ceremonial vessels of the Crystal Empire, but sleek, powerful craft built by the ancient civilization. Ships designed to be piloted by guardians and their chosen allies. They had no time to celebrate. The Crystal Empire's priests would be starting their ceremony soon. Jack's suit showed less than an hour of air remained. They rushed into the hangar, quickly realizing that Shadow's energy could power these ships just as it had powered the ruined systems. The ship they chose came to life under Shadow's touch. The other survivors piled in, bringing what little they had salvaged from their time in the ruins. Jack found himself in what had to be the pilot's seat, his suit somehow connecting with the ship's controls through the same technology that had let him link with Shadow. They lifted off just as the Crystal Empire's priests entered the ruins. Jack caught a glimpse of their faces through the ship's viewers. Their perfect marble features twisted in shock as they saw their sacrifice, not only alive, but in command of their god's own vessel. The ship shot upward, its ancient engines far more powerful than anything the Crystal Empire possessed. They broke through the toxic atmosphere like it was nothing, emerging into space where the Empire's ceremonial fleet hung in orbit. The other ships, caught completely by surprise, scattered in panic. Jack's suit gave its final warning. Minutes of air left. But it didn't matter anymore. Their ship's systems had already adapted to provide breathable atmosphere for all its occupants. They were not just escaping. They were returning in a vessel that proved the Crystal Empire's entire religion was built on misunderstanding the ancient builder's true purpose. Through the ship's front viewport, Jack watched the ceremonial fleet fall into chaos. Some ships fled, while others tried to pursue them, but none could match the speed and power of their ancient vessel. Shadow stood beside Jack's pilot's seat, its 6 eyes glowing with what could only be described as satisfaction. They had done more than survive. They had unlocked the truth that had been waiting thousands of years to be discovered. The Crystal Empire had meant to sacrifice Jack to their gods. Instead, they had helped him become living proof that their gods were never gods at all, just an ancient species waiting for someone clever enough to solve their puzzle. As their ship accelerated away from the maw, Jack knew this wasn't just an escape. It was the beginning of a revolution. The ancient ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the Crystal Empire's homeworld. In the 3 days since their escape, Jack and the survivors had learned more about their vessel's capabilities than they had imagined possible. Shadow's connection to the ship's systems had unlocked databases full of information about the ancient builders and their true purpose. The Crystal Empire's capital city stretched across half a continent, its towering spires reaching into the clouds. But now, looking at it through the ship's advanced sensors, Jack could see what the Empire's people had missed. Their entire civilization was built on top of more ruins, identical to the ones they had escaped from on the maw. Shadow stood at Jack's side as they approached the city, its armor plates rippling with energy that powered their weapon systems. They didn't plan to attack. They had something more powerful than weapons. They had the truth. The ship's communication system activated automatically as they entered the Empire's airspace. Defense platforms turned to track them, but none fired. The ancient vessel's energy signature had triggered something in the city's systems, just as Shadow had triggered the ruin's door. Jack's voice boomed across every crystal tower and street in the capital. People of the Crystal Empire, your gods were never gods. The beings you worship were scientists and explorers. The maw was their testing ground, and your sacrifices were never meant to die. Patterns of light danced across the city as ancient systems, dormant for thousands of years, began to wake up. The other survivors used their ship's technology to project images into the sky, proof of the ancient builder's true purpose. Shadow's presence itself was evidence, a living guardian created not to kill, but to protect and guide worthy species to a greater understanding. The Crystal Empire's religious leaders emerged from their temples, their marble faces showing fear for the first time in centuries. But it was too late to hide the truth. More ships were rising from hidden hangars beneath the city. Other guardians like Shadow, awakening from long hibernation, called to action by their returned brother. The smoke being had discovered something else in the ship's databases. The ancient builders hadn't abandoned their creations. They had left everything needed for younger species to follow in their footsteps. The maw wasn't a death world. It was a university, waiting for students clever enough to understand its lessons. Jack watched as crowds gathered in the streets below. The Empire's people were seeing their history rewritten before their eyes. The bird-lizard survivor used the ship's systems to show them the truth about their own world, how their ancestors had found ruins like these and built their civilization on top of them, mistaking technology for magic, science for religion. The living metal survivor interfaced with the city's systems, releasing thousands of records that the Empire's priests had hidden away. Files that showed how many sacrifices could have been saved if someone had only tried to understand instead of worship. Prism's crystalline body glowed as it transmitted proof that their own species had once been students of the ancient builders, before fear and superstition twisted their knowledge into religious doctrine. Shadow moved to the ship's front viewport, its 6 eyes watching as more guardian beasts emerged from hibernation. They had waited millennia for species worthy of inheriting the ancient builder's legacy. Now they would have a chance to fulfill their true purpose. Not as monsters in a sacrifice, but as teachers and protectors. The Crystal Empire's leaders tried to maintain control, but their power crumbled as quickly as their religious lies. The people wanted answers, not more ceremony. They wanted to learn, not worship. And now they had living proof that the universe held wonders far greater than their primitive sacrificial rituals. Jack looked at his unlikely family, Shadow, the survivors, and now an entire civilization awakening to the truth. The Crystal Empire had sacrificed him to their gods, but those gods had turned out to be something far more interesting. Teachers waiting for the right students to arrive. As the sun set over the crystal towers, Jack smiled. Humanity's first contact with alien life hadn't gone quite as anyone would have expected. He had been taken as a sacrifice but would return to Earth as something else entirely. A bridge between worlds, a student of ancient mysteries, and living proof that the universe's greatest powers didn't demand death. They demanded understanding, courage, and the wisdom to know the difference between blind worship and true discovery. Shadow pressed its head against Jack's shoulder, making that strange purring sound that had first marked their friendship. Together, they had done more than survive. They had started a revolution of knowledge that would change not just the Crystal Empire, but every world that looked up at the stars and wondered what waited in the darkness between them.